I made a fortune from betting these 5 sports, and so can you. I'm Tony from Analyst, a full-time betting professional with over 30 years at the top. If you want to learn sports betting, let's crack on. Before we get into my top 5, I just want one thing from you, and it's not a like, it's not a subscribe, it's not join the channel. You can choose if you wish to do that. What I want to know is, which sports do you like betting, and do you make a profit from them? Let me know in the comments and I will answer. At number 5 is NFL and college football. Now, the reasons I like this goes back at quite a time actually, going back to when the internet first was a thing. I was actually betting the middles at that stage, so concentrating on the 3s and 7s, betting over 7.5 points and under 6.5, and trying, hoping that it would land on the 7. Right, by doing so, I was actually risking 100 from maybe 2,200 stakes, and with the upside being 2,000 if it did land in the middle. Since it had about a 6 to 1 chance, I was obviously quids in, so to say. Now, over the years, obviously, it's developed further. There's a lot more sort of sports books coming. The prices are much sort of keener now. You can actually get even better odds by shopping around, getting on the betting exchanges through the actual Asian bookmakers, or Pinnacle Sports and so on, right? So you can get better odds now than then. The only thing is, of course, they're all sort of copying each other nowadays, and the data is freely available, so it's a bit more of a sort of mishmash. But then again, you can still make a big money by betting on college, and I would also suggest that you can look at in-play betting, because the swings are still not properly calculated. And the other thing I would really suggest that you looked at was actually the home team, right? In NFL, you get some teams, they're actually there, training in plus 20 degrees, and then they've got to play in a stadium where it's like minus 15, minus 20 degrees, right? That's going to make a big difference when it comes to actual home advantage. Right, so these are the types of things that you can concentrate on if you are betting in NFL. Now, I do love the sport, and if it was on a different time zone, believe me, I would be even more positive about betting it. So it would be higher up the list. So NFL, number 5. Number 4 is NBA and college basketball. Now, let me tell you the reasons why I prefer this more than NFL. And it's really simple. There are more games. The in-play betting is easier to profit from. Now, the sports books, they are too focused on the actual scoreline rather than looking at the condition of the team. That's the thing with using algorithms. It's actually reading what's happening, but it's not reading the state of the team or the players that can possibly come on the bench, who's going to be changed and so on, right? So this is why you can make a lot of money with in-play betting. Another thing that stands out actually about NBA is the player markets. Now, the sports books get these badly wrong. If you've got a Bet365 account, if you can get yourself, a sports bet account in Australia or a FanDuel account in the US, you can't possibly go wrong. They make so many mistakes when it comes to the player markets. Now, obviously, the lines are a little bit more sort of difficult to read because, unlike NFL, they don't always play to the end. If they've got a 12-point margin, they probably will defend it when it comes to push comes to shove. So just bear that in mind. Less players, more games than NFL, it plays every day, and they are badly wrong with the in-play market. And number 3 is football, or soccer as the Americans like to call it. Now, a lot of you would probably expect me to put this number 1 because it is the world's biggest sport, and that's where most of the money is bet. It's also true for us. Most of our stakes actually go on betting football. But the thing is about football, the margins, your actual win margin is very low. Now, in some of the lower leagues, you can get a lot more, but your stakes are going to be significantly lower. So that's what makes it very difficult. I'll also tell you, data is very expensive, and if you're also acquiring information, keeping up to the news, having informers, that is another cost. You're probably going to have to be betting in Asia where the markets are sharp, or with the betting exchanges if there's liquidity in the game itself, right? So these are things that you're actually up against. Now, you've also got to consider it's not really a one-man band job, right? You do need a group. You need to work together, because if you're running sports modeling, if you're running data services, if you're really getting into this big time and want to get a number of bets down, you've got to work hard, and that means you're going to need more than one person. Now, I would suggest to you, of course, if you are betting football, there is money to be made by betting in play. You can start looking at the Australian leagues, you can start looking at the Scandinavian leagues during summer. It's fantastic, by watching the games, watching the psychology, looking at the bench, understanding what's happening, the amount of shots that are going on target and so on, right? It's going to give you, a bit of an advantage over some kind of algorithm. And this is where we do get bigger margins. That's where I bet in myself. And so it is a little bit more advantageous. But, in theory, football betting is quite difficult. So just bear that in mind. And if you are going to be betting football, I would also suggest this is where you have a look at Pinnacle Odds Dropper, because, they are going to inform you where the clever money is going. And on that note, if you can get everyday sportsbooks, Pinnacle Odds Dropper can do the work for you. Now, just look at the name Pinnacle Odds Dropper and you'll understand exactly what it does. Pinnacle Odds Dropper tracks the falling odds at the sharpest sportsbook in the world. Clients receive a notification in a split second of the drop value and are given benchmark odds they need to beat. If you find higher odds at your sportsbooks, you have a positive EV, expected value bet, and can build long-term profits. Pod covers most sport and bet types, and it has numerous tools to help you perform better again. With settings, odds and liquidity charts and a direct feed to all the Pinnacle events, you can only benefit. With many subscribers already making over 100k per year from using Pod, the costs of the service are negligible. Check it out for yourself and make winning easy. My number 2 is horse racing, the sport of kings. Now, for Americans, it's obviously going to be tough to get your heads around this because you're mainly used to working with PMUs and totalizators. However, with that said, there was the computer club that made millions from betting on Hong Kong totalizator, so it can be done. But you should be looking towards sportsbooks, and there are ways to actually get into that. Now, obviously for us from the UK, it's slightly different. We've been in this business for many, many years, and I can assure you, horse racing is one of the most lucrative sports to bet in. The biggest issue that you've got with racing is actually in the limits. It is quite difficult to get money down. Now, once upon a time, the Betfair exchange used to have fantastic liquidity, but that is not the case anymore, or at least it comes much later in the day. Now, where there's a will, there's a way. You could possibly use runners. The biggest problem that you've got with that, if you start hitting the betting shops, is that the runners normally have got loud mouths and they tell everybody. You also see that with these online platforms where they want you to actually offer your tip services and so on, right? They are actually getting this information for free. So just also bear that in mind, if you're going to go into horse racing. Now, on the racetrack itself, you can actually get money down, but most of the bookmakers there, once you're a face, they're pretty well what we would put under the term as pussies as well, right? So it is a tough game to get the big money down. But then again, on the other side of the coin, you've got massive margins, right? On flat race in the UK, I'm getting 16%. I'm getting 18 to 20% on HF racing, and once I start betting overseas with the UK bookmakers, all the betting exchanges, then you can start getting up to 20-25% in profit. So horse racing would be my number 2, and it would definitely be my number 1 if I was allowed to bet what I wished. Before I get around to my number 1, I'd just like to make a few honourable mentions about other sports that I'm going to skip out, right? One is cricket, right? Obviously, if you're in places like India, this is going to be massive, right? A lot of people in the UK also bet on cricket quite heavily. It's not my sort of thing. I probably got traumatized by it in school, and ever since then it's just been boring for me. Also MLB. Now, I'm going to mention in the last one that I like inconsistent sports. MLB comes to that. I'm sure people are making lots of money from it. It's just not in my sort of mandate. ATP tennis, again, the men's game, very interesting. I'm sure you can make profits if you follow it intensively, but I don't. So, that's just a simple matter of choice. And then, of course, you've got MMA. I know a lot of people, especially Americans, who are making good money from MMA. You can get decent bet sizes down, and there are opportunities there. But again, it's not going to be in my top 5 for the reasons aforementioned. And while I do come from a rugby background, I'm afraid that that's not going to be included as well. I don't get much time for watching rugby nowadays. The limits are a little bit lower, and there's not that much to sort of bet on, right? So that's not going to come into contention, but they're all worth an honourable mention. For those of you who want to fast track your success in sports betting, you might want to consider my mentorship program. This is one-on-one stuff directly with you, no one size fits all, and I do show you how to succeed right at sports betting. This is the way forward. If you really want to get there fast, check out the pinned comment for the link and you can read what it's all about there. So I just heard the drum roll as we're getting down to my number 1. And let me tell you, a lot of you are going to be surprised by this, unless of course you visit our website, betteranalyst.com, and you'll see for yourself. We give out a lot of tips on this sport, and it is WTA tennis. That's the women's game and not the men's game. Now, we find the women's game much more lucrative for a number of reasons, and the main one being is the actual inconsistencies actually create the betting opportunities. You can find more value. If you can learn to read the women's game, then you will benefit in the long term. Now, the great thing also is that there's only 200 players involved. They play 10 months a year, so it doesn't take much before you get a fantastic understanding of each player's ability. What surface they're good on, are they good servers, which tournaments do they play particularly well in, which continents even. There's like a lot of sort of questions you can pose yourself. But also the great thing is there's about sort of 10 or 12 metrics that you've got to sort of take on board with women's tennis. So that is also advantageous, so putting it all together, you can quickly learn women's tennis. And for me, from a betting stance, 16% profit this year, ROI on each bet. That's absolute brilliant return. That's much better than we've been doing in the past, but we've been a lot more sort of focused this year. So, maybe that's sort of helping. If you go to the tournaments, you will learn a lot yourself, and it will just give you a better feeling of what's happening, outside the court, on the court, during the warm-up and so on. So watch matches, get to the in-play markets, fantastic value. You can see some great big momentum swings, and algorithms can't necessarily read that. When Pinnacle come out with their opening lines, you will see the other bookmakers start changing their initial lines. And I would also suggest concentrate on the early rounds of tennis tournaments, the first and second round. And if a player went deep in their last tournament, then maybe sort of hold back on them, because at the end of the day, if they've had to travel, they haven't had time to acclimatize. So just think of that as well, and just have a bigger picture. So there it is. I hope you got something from this video. Do let me know in the comments what you do prefer for sports, and whether you are making profits from them. Also consider that mentorship program, and check out Pinnacle Odds Dropper. Like I said, it is the easiest way to win money. It's 365 days a year you can be sports betting, and believe me, a lot of professional gamblers are using this software. So check things out, and keep it here on this channel, or subscribe if you wish to, and we'll catch you in the next one soon. Take care. Bye bye.